Both were orphans with tragic pasts, yet the girl fought fiercely to protect the boy. Even in sleep, she stayed close, guarding him, all because she had awakened to the realization that she was a transmigrator. In the original story, the girl, a cannon fodder villain, was expelled from the orphanage for bullying the male protagonist, Damien, and froze to death on the streets. To change this grim fate, Ellie began her life as Damien's bodyguard. If she could just hold on until Duke Hughes adopted him. And the original plot unfolded, leading Damien to his happy life with a female protagonist. She could save her own life and regain her freedom. However, the plot began to veer off course. The Duke wanted to take her home too. I want her to be my daughter-in-law. The nobles of his country had a peculiar hobby, adopting orphans. The orphanage director, eager to please the nobles, only took in children who were beautiful. Ellie was one of them, but because her mother had been a notorious thief, Ellie was shunned by the aristocracy and abandoned 3 times. It wasn't until an accident that she awakened to her identity as a transmigrator. Familiar with the original story, she longed to meet one person, Damien. Damien had once been the young master of Duke Clyde's house. Because the Duke's family was powerful and wealthy beyond measure, the Emperor grew wary and ultimately decided to eliminate them. Duke and Duchess Clyde perished in a tragic fall from a cliff. But Duke Clyde seemed to have foreseen this day. He had left a will. His entire fortune was entrusted to his only friend, Duke Hughes. And Duke Hughes began searching for his friend's son, Damien, who had disappeared in the accident. Today was the day Damien officially arrived. Having lived a life of slavery, Damien had suffered immensely. He was scarred, frail, and small. Seeing him in this state, Ellie couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. The orphanage director asked the other children to explain the rules and then left. Kays, the oldest child, stood up menacingly. With a few of his lackeys, he was about to begin his usual initiation of the newcomer. In the original story, Ellie had been one of Kays' followers, but in this life, determined to survive, she flatly refused Kays' invitation. He looks too weak, she thought. Noticing the boy's vacant eyes, Ellie recalled her own experiences of being bullied. She shuddered. It was dinner time. Knowing that Damien's days of torment were just beginning, Ellie intended to feign ignorance and stay out of it. After all, he was the male protagonist of the novel. With his protagonist's halo, he would surely have a good life eventually. Even if he took a few beatings, it wouldn't matter. That's what she told herself, but her body instinctively wanted to help him. Thinking of that empty gaze, Ellie decided to intervene. Just this once. Never again. When she knocked on the storage room door, she saw Damien slumped on the floor, bruised and battered. Pity flickered in her eyes. She couldn't help but sarcastically address Kays. Then, forcing a smile, she made an excuse, saying the director needed them. Kays, gripping Damien, issued a few threats and swaggered off with his cronies. Ellie then approached Damien to check his injuries. Seeing him carelessly wipe at a wound, she quickly stopped him. She pulled out an ointment she had stolen from the director and offered to apply it. But Damien refused. "It's no use," he said. "Before the wounds heal, I'll be beaten again." Ellie was surprised that he understood this at such a young age. Resistance only brought more pain. Only submission could quell the violence. Still, she pressed the ointment into his hand and turned to leave. Ellie had thought that having read the novel, she would be immune to the boy's suffering. But seeing his face as wretched as her own, she felt an unexpected pang of empathy. The boy, the son of the Empire's richest man, lived a life worse than a dog. Ever since his parents had been assassinated by the Emperor, Damien, having survived, began a bleak life of slavery. Even when bullied at the orphanage, he merely endured it. At dinner, Ellie didn't see Damien. She grew worried, afraid he was going hungry. Ellie had saved her bread, intending to give it to him, but he was nowhere to be found. Just then, Kays and his lackeys approached. Kays told Ellie he'd overheard the director talking. Apparently, Damien had been a slave and had even hunted monsters in some dark place. With that scrawny body? Impossible. Don't tell me you're interested in that guy, Ellie. Ellie's heart tightened. Kays had bullied most of the children in the orphanage. He was especially cruel to children Ellie showed any interest in, simply because he had a crush on her. She couldn't let Damien suffer at his hands. Ellie forced a smile. No, not at all. He seemed to have gone to the storage room. Maybe the teachers took him for extra food? He's so handsome, after all. They must favor him. The director even said he could hunt monsters. He must be really strong, then. Ellie's praise irritated Kays. To prove he was stronger than Damien, Kays and his followers headed for the storage room, intent on teaching Damien a lesson. Ellie stopped him. This is for you, she offered, holding out her bread. Kays, flustered, mistook it for a gesture of affection. He didn't realize he was walking into a trap. When they reached the storage room, Damien was gone. Instead, a teacher caught them red-handed, the bread in their possession serving as irrefutable evidence of their attempted theft. A harsh punishment awaited them. Late that night, under the cloak of darkness, Ellie slipped out to search for Damien. Remembering the rumors of him hunting monsters in a dark place, she wondered if he was hiding deep in the woods. In the original story, the Duke had asked Damien why his swordsmanship was so exceptional at such a young age. To survive in the darkness, I had to hone my skills. Ellie had assumed this line was merely meant to emphasize the protagonist's grim upbringing. But seeing the boy huddled in the woods, shivering, she understood it was reality. You'll get sick like this. Kays and his gang have been dealt with by the teachers. You can sleep soundly tonight. Come back with me. But Damien didn't move. That's only temporary. They'll be back tomorrow. I'm more comfortable here. Ellie realized Damien had been tormented in the abyss of darkness for so long that he preferred the freezing cold to human company. But who would willingly choose such isolation? She promised him they wouldn't return, and even if they did, they would soon disappear. I promise you, no one will bully you again. Looking at the girl's gentle face, Damien felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. The image of Ellie giving him the ointment resurfaced. An unfamiliar warmth spread through him. Why are you so kind to me? Because I want to be. It was the truth. She couldn't die tragically like she did in the original story. She extended her hand. Let's go eat. Damien took her hand, as if grasping onto the hope of escaping the darkness. Ellie quietly led him into her room. She told him to take off his clothes, leaving Damien bewildered. Take off your clothes. How else are you going to bathe? Only the bathroom in the director's room has hot water. You're practically frozen solid from being out in the snow. You need a hot bath, or you'll get frostbite and your hands and feet will rot. Seeing him hesitate, Ellie assumed he was shy, but Damien spoke timidly. My body, it's disgusting. If you see it, you'll definitely be. Ellie, realizing what he meant, understood. His time as a slave must have left him covered in scars. She took his hand. Your body isn't disgusting at all. There's no need to be upset. We can't waste any more time. If the director comes back, we won't be able to bathe. With that, she ushered Damien into the bathroom. The boy sank into the hot water. The long-forgotten sensation of comfort washed over him, allowing him to finally relax. When he finished, Ellie peeked in, asking if it felt good. She brought him clean clothes, though they were a bit too big, hanging loosely on his small frame. Ellie had also snuck a sandwich from the storage room for him. Having lived as a slave, Damien had never seen one before. It was utterly baffling. Just how cruel were those slave traders to treat a child so horribly? This is called a sandwich. You just bite into the pointy end, she explained. Watching Ellie eat with such relish, Damien took a large bite. His eyes widened. It was delicious. He looked like a puppy with chubby cheeks. Noticing Damien's hair was still dripping, Ellie grabbed a towel and began to dry it. She told him not to catch a cold. Her caring words made Damien feel even more reliant on her. He even bent down to make it easier for her to dry his hair. His docile manner made Ellie's heart melt. Then, she noticed something. On his neck, there was a wound that looked like a beast bite. Damien explained he'd had it since his master found him, which was why he always kept his hair long. Ellie's heart ached. Just what kind of cruel place had Damien lived in? She lifted his thick bangs. The moment their eyes met, Ellie was struck by his beauty. His innocent face, his clear blue eyes, were even more captivating than she'd imagined. Noticing her staring, Damien blushed. Ellie, thinking he had a fever, quickly asked if he felt unwell. No, I'm just a little warm, he mumbled. Relieved, Ellie led him back to her room. Kays hadn't returned from his punishment yet, but to prevent him from bullying Damien, you'll sleep in my bed with me tonight. Sleep here. Dedicated to her role as his protector, she was determined to keep him safe, even if it meant sharing a bed. Damien was flustered. At Ellie's urging, he climbed into the bed, his face flushed, his body stiff. As they lay close, Ellie caught a whiff of a pleasant scent coming from him. You smell nice, she thought. Let me smell again. Ah, maybe that's a bit creepy. Ellie wished Damien good night. Seeing him motionless, she prompted, aren't you going to say good night back? Damien mumbled a good night and burrowed under the covers. He was utterly adorable. Ellie quickly drifted off to sleep. Damien, however, lay awake, his eyes wide open, studying her. Why is she so kind to me, he wondered. Is it out of guilt? He replayed the day's events, each act of kindness Ellie had shown him. Am I really not disgusting? Her eyes, they were so beautiful and bright when she looked at me. But I'm just a slave. I can't expect anything. Lost in thought, Damien finally fell asleep. In his dreams, the horrors of his past returned. In the darkness, he stood alone, facing terrifying monsters. And his master, watching with amusement, eagerly anticipated the carnage. No one was there to help him. He was left to fight the monstrous creatures alone, a desperate struggle for survival. Then, Ellie's voice calling his name finally pulled him from the nightmare. He gasped for breath, his chest heaving, a sight that worried Ellie deeply. You're sweating so much. Are you sick? She asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Damien was taken aback. No one had ever shown him such care. He grabbed Ellie's hand as she reached for medicine. I'm fine, he insisted, though his voice was weak. Ellie gently stroked his hair, her heart aching for him. Her touch sent a strange warmth through Damien. His heart beat faster. It felt like sunshine spreading through his entire body. If I said I wasn't feeling well, he thought, would Ellie be even kinder to me? Just then, a loud bang echoed through the room. Kays burst through the door, his face contorted with rage. Ellie, you tricked me, he roared, having realized he'd been played. He turned his fury on Damien. It's all because of this brat. Ellie stepped in front of Damien, shielding him. You only got tricked because you're so gullible, she retorted. Kays lunged forward, incensed. How could you do this to me? At that moment, a teacher entered, catching Kays red-handed. Kays tried to defend himself, claiming Ellie had provoked him. He insisted that Ellie had tricked him into going to the storage room the previous day. Seeing the teacher's skeptical look, Ellie launched into a dramatic performance. With a pitiful expression, she sobbed, Damien was sick yesterday. I want to get some medicine from the teacher. But Kay said all the teachers had gone to the gambling hall. Tears welled in her eyes. How could the teachers abandon us and go gamble? The teacher shifted uncomfortably. He had not only been gambling, but had also been meeting his lover in the storage room. As Ellie's sobs intensified and she threatened to tell the director, the teacher quickly stopped her, placing all the blame on Kays. He dragged Kays out of the room for a severe reprimand. Kays, utterly bewildered and unjustly accused, couldn't defend himself. Silence fell over the room. It seemed Damien would be safe from bullying, at least for a while. Ellie turned to Damien, who was staring at her in stunned silence, and boasted, See, I told you I wouldn't let anyone bully you again. The bully had been about to take his revenge, but he was no match for the dramatic girl. A few tears were all it took for her to triumph, and he was left to stew in confinement. Kay seethed with anger, but, blinded by his infatuation, he didn't blame Ellie. It had to be Damien's fault. Just you wait, he fumed. I'll be the only one Ellie cares about. After the commotion died down, Ellie saw the confused look on Damien's face. Adults should always help children, she explained. Someone will help you someday. When that happens, please believe that you will have a happy life. Ellie was hinting at the future, the arrival of the Duke and the female protagonist. To Damien, Ellie, angelic as she was, represented his future happiness. Unaware of Damien's thoughts, Ellie assumed he was worried about her lying to the teacher. She started to explain, but Damien already understood. If you want revenge, you have to be ruthless. I may have lied, but it's better than enduring bullying silently. He warned Damien never to suffer in silence again. Looking at her beautiful profile, Damien realized it was the first time he'd ever heard such words. To survive, he had always obeyed his master's every command. Now, for Ellie, he resolved to become strong. He would protect her, just as she protected him. He would keep his promise. The orphanage director, waking with a pounding head after a night of revelry, stumbled to the kitchen door. He blinked in surprise at the sight of Damien and Ellie bustling about. Why is that slave working here? He wondered. He had made an agreement with Damien's owner to look after the boy while he was away, with the understanding that Damien would be returned soon. If Damien's owner discovered he had been made to work, the director would face severe repercussions. He was about to call out to Damien when a commotion outside interrupted him. Kays, having escaped his confinement, was on a rampage, seeking revenge on Damien. The director demanded an explanation. A teacher, arriving on the scene, explained that Kays had stolen something from the storage room and was now denying it. The director ordered the teacher to take Kays away. Seeing no way out, Kays decided to drag Damien down with him. Pointing a finger, he blurted, Damien was in the storage room too. He just ran away. No, Ellie cried, stepping forward to defend Damien. Damien was sick. He was with me the whole time. The director was surprised. Since being rejected by 3 families, Ellie had been quiet and withdrawn. Now, she was actively defending Damien. It was strange. Damien, docile and obedient in front of Ellie, showed a fiercer side to others. He was clearly playing favorites, reserving his gentleness solely for Ellie. The director, weary of the children's squabbles, instructed the teacher to handle the situation. He also ordered Damien to stop working, but the boy clung to Ellie's skirt, unwilling to leave her side. Only when Ellie stroked his hair and promised to see him as soon as her work was done, did Damien reluctantly follow the teacher. In a noisy dining hall, Damien crouched alone in a corner, patiently waiting for Ellie. He hated being alone, but he didn't want Ellie to think he was clingy. Finally, he heard her voice. His earlier unhappiness vanished. He took her hand and trailed behind her, asking timidly if he could sit beside her. Suddenly, Tommy appeared, determined to insert himself between them. That spot next to Ellie is mine, he declared. Before Damien's arrival, he had always sat beside her. Damien bristled. Who are you? Ellie, sensing a brewing conflict, intervened. Be nice, Tommy, she coaxed. A gentleman always gives up his seat. Tommy immediately relinquished his spot. Here you go, he said with a flourish. Because I'm the most handsome. He looked at Damien's innocent face, mistaking him for a sweet, harmless child. Just then, a wail erupted. Betty had spilled something on her doll. Ellie told the boys to start eating. She would comfort Betty. Don't worry, she soothed. Your doll is just a little wet. I'll clean it for you. It'll be as good as new. With Ellie gone, Damien retreated into silence once more. Tommy tried to introduce himself, but Damien merely glanced at him coldly and turned away. Tommy, assuming Damien was shy, explained that he was Ellie's good friend. We can all play together later, he offered. But the words good friend triggered something in Damien. His eyes turned icy. He stared at Tommy with a chilling intensity. Tommy felt a sudden chill in the air. Ellie returned to check on Damien, asking if he was eating. The brooding boy instantly transformed, his face brightening. He nodded vigorously, taking large, obedient bites. Tommy stared, dumbfounded, but the warning in Damien's eyes kept him silent. What a two-faced brat, he thought, bewildered. Innocent? That kid's a wild animal, Tommy thought, watching Damien's sudden shift in demeanor. Ellie, you've been completely fooled. He's strong enough to take down a monster, but he pretends to be a sweet little puppy around you, just to be special in your eyes. Later that day, after Damien's bath, Ellie, as usual, helped him dry his hair. She longed to pinch his chubby cheeks, but a worrying thought crossed her mind. What if someone saw his adorable face? What if some nobleman took him away? That wouldn't do. According to the stories she knew, Damien's adoptive father had to be Duke Hughes. Until they met, his beauty needed to remain hidden. Back in their room, preparing for bed, Ellie pointed to a bed against the wall. You'll sleep here from now on, Damien, she said. Damien froze. He wouldn't be sleeping with Ellie anymore. His face fell. After a moment of silence, he slowly climbed into his assigned bed, his spirits plummeting. He looked like a dejected puppy, abandoned by its owner. Ellie, mistaking his sadness for exhaustion, said her usual goodnight. Sweet dreams, Damien. Damien, after a pause, replied, Sweet dreams, Ellie. Ellie was taken aback. It was the first time he had used her name. Such a simple thing, yet it filled her with unexpected joy. Later that night, Ellie woke to use the bathroom. Damien was gone. Beside her, Betty clutched her doll, trembling. Kaze is back, she whispered. Ellie's heart sank. She knew this meant trouble, and she was right. At that very moment, Kaze and his cronies were cornering Damien. After days of simmering resentment, Kaze finally had his chance for revenge. Let me tell you something, he sneered. You mean nothing to Ellie. Damien's eyes turned cold and hard. He stared at Kaze, his gaze unwavering. He remembered Ellie's words, urging him not to endure bullying any longer. He clenched his fists, ready to fight back. But Kaze's next words stopped him cold. Ellie, she only feels sorry for weak, pathetic wastes of space like you. Don't flatter yourself. You're nothing special. She just pities you. Damien's resolve crumbled. He had endured countless cruel words as a slave, but hearing that he meant nothing to Ellie felt like drowning in quicksand. His heart turned to ash. He gave up all resistance. Kaze, fueled by his own twisted satisfaction, continued his brutal assault. He grabbed Damien and shoved him into the lake. Damien whispered Ellie's name, just as Ellie rushed forward and grabbed his arm. Her eyes blazed with fury as she glared at Kaze. What are you doing? Waking to find Damien gone and learning that Kaze had taken him, Ellie had raced towards the lake. This was Kaze's trademark cruelty, shoving anyone he disliked into the water. Arriving just in time, she saw it happening. Without hesitation, she had lunged forward and caught Damien. "Are you insane?" she demanded of Kays. "You could have killed him." Kays, however, felt wronged. In his mind, Ellie had changed. She no longer joined in his bullying games. Instead, she was kind and caring towards Damien. This shift filled him with jealousy. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Consumed by rage, he raised his fist and lunged at Damien again. Ellie, quick as a flash, pulled Damien into her arms and jumped aside. Kays, unable to stop his momentum, Kays plunged headfirst into the lake. Ellie immediately checked on Damien. Once she was sure he was all right, she pulled him away, leaving Kays and his cronies sputtering in the water. It was the first time Damien had seen Ellie so angry. Why? He wondered. Is she mad at me for causing trouble? Thinking this, he loosened his grip on her hand. But Ellie turned and asked why he hadn't fought back. Sadness welled in Damien's eyes. "So she is angry with me." Despair edged his voice. "Are you only looking after me because you pity me? If so, just forget it. I'm used to being treated like this." This startled Ellie. "No," she exclaimed, rushing to explain. "I don't think you're weak at all. In fact," she continued, "I think you're stronger than anyone." It was the first time anyone had called him strong. Damien had prepared himself for her anger, but at that moment, tears spilled down his cheeks. "She doesn't hate me." All his pent-up emotions burst forth. Seeing him cry, Ellie panicked. She repeated her reassurances over and over, finally linking her pinky finger with his. "I promise I'll never hate you," she vowed. Damien clutched her hand tightly. From now on, he would hold her hand always. He would sit beside her at every meal. Ellie reiterated her advice. "If anyone bullies you, fight back. Don't just take it, and don't overthink things." Walking back to the orphanage, Damien replayed Ellie's words. "Someone will help you someday. And when that happens, you'll be happy, I promise." So this feeling, this happiness I feel even though I'm crying, this must be what happiness feels like. In a dimly lit room, bodies lay scattered across the cold floor. A man sheathed his blood-stained sword. This was Duke Hughes, the man searching for Damien. Faulty intelligence had led him here, forcing him to eliminate some trash. Now, he would move on to the next area. The boy's fever spiked to 102 degrees, but he insisted he wasn't sick. He just didn't want Ellie to worry. He remembered the previous night, when Kays had almost pushed him into the lake. Ellie had arrived just in time. Afterward, he turned into a whimpering puppy, begging to share Ellie's bed, claiming he'd have nightmares otherwise. Ellie had worried about the narrow bed, but one look at his pitiful face had softened her heart. Looking at the boy beside her, his face radiant with happiness, Ellie felt a surge of warmth. "Lying here like this," she teased, "we look like brother and sister." "I'm not your brother," Damien retorted. "But you're only 11, Ellie pointed out. "I'm 15. What else would you be?" Damien fell silent. Seeing his displeasure, Ellie assumed he disliked being treated like a child. Actually, she quickly reassured him, "Sleeping with you is really warm." Damien blushed crimson. "And me too," he stammered. The two exchanged goodnights and drifted off to sleep, perhaps because of Ellie's presence. Damien dreamt of playing happily with Ellie. He felt a deep gratitude towards her. "Being with you, it really is happiness." But the next day, Damien woke up burning with fever. The thermometer went off the charts. Still, the boy tried to hide it. Ellie, however, was filled with guilt. She hadn't taken good enough care of him. She told Damien to rest, promising to return as soon as her chores were done. Though Damien desperately wanted her to stay, he obediently agreed, not wanting her to worry. Ellie cleaned the director's office, planning to steal some medicine for Damien once he left. But the director seemed to be in a foul mood today. Seeing Ellie lingering, he snapped at her and sent her away. Apparently, the orphanage was having financial difficulties. The orphanage was constantly losing money, a weight that pressed heavily on the director's shoulders. His gaze drifted to the cabinet where the spirit stones were kept. Could he really sell these treasures? He wondered. The thought was agonizing. He turned, his face twisting with disgust as he looked at Ellie. If only she weren't a thief's daughter, he thought bitterly. I could sell her for a fortune and clear my debts. Just then, a teacher rushed in with a report. Duke Hughes, it seemed, was visiting every noble household that had adopted child. He was searching for his late friend, Duke Clyde's son. Terrified of encountering the formidable Duke Hughes, nobles were now refusing to adopt any children. Following the director's instructions, the teacher had spread the rumor that Duke Clyde's son was at the orphanage. Duke Hughes was sure to arrive soon. But fear gnawed at the teacher. "What if he finds out it's a lie?" he stammered. "Won't the Duke kill us all?" The director scoffed. "The Duke hasn't even seen the boy's face," he said dismissively. "He only knows he's a black-haired boy. He'll never know the difference." Overhearing this conversation, Ellie's heart pounded in her chest. The man she had been waiting for was finally coming. He was coming to save Damien, to find his deceased friend's son. The Duke had turned the entire empire upside down, visiting every noble family who had adopted an orphan. He had to confirm whether any of them were the black-haired boy he sought. That day, following a lead, the Duke arrived at the home of Damien's previous owner. The woman, mistaking him for an ordinary wealthy man, plotted to rob and kill him. Facing imminent death, she blurted out that the child he sought was at an orphanage. The Duke's subordinates had also received a letter a few days prior, confirming the child was indeed at the nearby holy orphanage. Though it called itself an orphanage, it was in reality a place of sordid dealings, a hub for the buying and selling of children. The Duke couldn't wait a moment longer. He immediately set off for the orphanage. Meanwhile, the orphanage director was blissfully unaware of the impending disaster. The news of the Duke's imminent arrival, however, filled him with anxiety. Several children were ill. He couldn't let the Duke see them in such a sickly state. With a heavy heart, he decided to sell one of his precious spirit stones to buy some cheap medicine, at least for appearances. But when he opened the cabinet, he froze. Several spirit stones were missing. Meanwhile, Ellie was tending to Damien, who was burning with fever. She was about to fetch some water to cool his brow. But even in his feverish delirium, Damien clung to her, refusing to let her go. Ellie soothed him gently. She had hoped the stolen spirit stone, with its emanating aura, would ease his suffering, but it seemed to have little effect. The boy's flushed face nuzzled unconsciously against her hand, melting her heart. Finally, when Damien drifted off to sleep, Ellie slipped away to fetch the water. She didn't notice the director suddenly looming behind her. "What are you doing?" he barked. Ellie plastered a smile on her face. "Damien is sick," she explained. "I'm taking care of him." Without warning, the director snatched the spirit stone from her pocket. "So you stole this for Damien too, did you?" As someone who had transmigrated into this world, Ellie didn't panic. Feigning ignorance, she chuckled and claimed she had taken it from Kay's. The director wasn't fooled. "So shameless," he sneered. "Just like your thieving mother." The word struck a raw nerve. A smug look spread across the director's face. He raised his hand to strike Ellie, but the blow landed on Damien's face. He had thrown himself in front of Ellie just in time. The boy glared defiantly at the director. "If you dare lay a hand on Ellie," he hissed, "I'll never forgive you." Because she was the daughter of a thief, the girl was constantly scorned. Even the orphanage director despised her parentage. Only Damien saw the girl as an angel in his life. He stood up for her when the director tried to hit her. "If you dare lay a hand on Ellie," he threatened, his small frame trembling with fury, "I'll never forgive you." The boy's unexpected ferocity momentarily stunned the director. Just then, the teacher rushed back in, breathless. "Duke Hugh is almost here," he exclaimed. The director's eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't expected him so soon. Quickly, he ordered the teacher, "Bring the blue-eyed, black-haired child to my office." He snarled another threat at Ellie and turned to leave. But Ellie grabbed his arm. "What about Damien?" she demanded. "He has black hair and blue eyes, too." The director scoffed. "You want me to present that sickly child to the Duke?" he retorted. "Are you trying to embarrass me?" Ellie opened her mouth to argue, but Damien, weakened by his fever, collapsed unconscious in her arms. With a sneer, the director abandoned them both. Clutching the unconscious boy, Ellie's resolve hardened. "I will make sure you see your family," she vowed silently. Meanwhile, Duke Hughes arrived at the orphanage gates, greeted only by a handful of nervous teachers. The Duke surveyed the isolated building, a sense of unease settling upon him. Something felt wrong. "Where is the child?" he demanded. The teachers stammered and hesitated, unable to meet his gaze. Losing patience, the Duke strode past them, intending to find the child himself. Just as he rounded a corner, he collided with a small girl. It was Ellie. The Duke crouched down to apologize, his eyes meeting Ellie's clear, green gaze. He paused, taken aback. Ellie, feigning ignorance of his identity, asked if he was there to adopt a child. She brightly informed him that all 5 of the black-haired, blue-eyed boys were in the director's office. The girl's cheerful demeanor caught the attention of the Duke's attendant, Antheus. He'd seen someone this unafraid of the Duke before, but that was a long time ago. They reached the director's office. The sight of the Duke sent the children inside into a fit of terrified wails. The director, however, remained confident. "The child you seek is definitely among these," he declared. The Duke produced a spirit stone imbued with a missing child's spiritual energy. He held it out, but the stone remained inert. The director was lying. Without hesitation, the Duke signaled to Antheus, who promptly struck the director. Realizing his precarious situation, the director still insisted. "The child is among these 4. But the girl had mentioned 5 children. In a flash, the Duke was upon the director, his sword pressed against the man's throat. "Where's the child you're hiding?" he growled. "Lie to me again, and I'll kill you." Because of a single sentence from a little girl, the Duke held a blade to the orphanage director's throat, all for the sake of finding his deceased friend's long-lost son. Meanwhile, Ellie watched, a whirlwind of emotions churning within her. The Duke was finally going to take Damien away. After all these days together, a surprising pang of sadness tugged at her heart. She whispered to the feverish Damien, "You won't be sick anymore from now on." The boy, too delirious to understand her words, only saw a tall, unfamiliar man stride into the room. The Duke's evident agitation surprised Antheus. He hadn't seen his master this emotional since his wife's death. The Duke's gaze fell first on the frail Damien, then shifted to Ellie beside him. Wasn't this the little girl he'd bumped into earlier? Perhaps it was the intensity of the Duke's scrutiny. But Damien, despite his weakened state, pushed himself in front of Ellie again. "If you dare bully Ellie," he rasped, his voice weak but resolute, "I won't let you get away with it. I don't care who you are." At that moment, the spirit stone in the Duke's hand pulsed with light. A surge of powerful spiritual energy emanated from it. The Duke knew he had finally found his friend Clyde's son. Just then, Damien collapsed again. "He's absorbing the spirit energy that was taken from him," the Duke explained. "It will help him regain his strength." Ellie touched Damien's forehead. His fever had broken. Now that the child was found, the Duke was ready to settle the score. He turned his sharp gaze on the teachers, demanding to know why the boy was in such a sorry state. Terrified, they scurried off to find the director. Ellie watched the Duke, his powerful aura radiating just as described in the book. The Duke, in turn, observed Ellie as she fussed over Damien. He couldn't shake the feeling that she'd known he was coming. Aware of the Duke's shrewdness, Ellie knew she couldn't easily deceive him. Carefully, she explained that she'd overheard the director mention his search for a black-haired, blue-eyed child. And the fact that there were 5 such children, the Duke added, his eyes narrowing. "Was that also something you overheard?" Ellie nodded, admitting her deliberate act. The Duke questioned why she hadn't brought Damien to him directly. Ellie had her reasons. She wanted the Duke to see the orphanage for himself, to witness the deplorable conditions the children lived in. All the chores were left to the children, while the teachers spent their evenings gambling, abandoning their charges without a second thought. Something in the girl's determined gaze struck a chord with the Duke. It was a look he'd seen before, a look of unwavering resolve. Just then, the director was brought before them. Without preamble, the Duke announced his intention to adopt Damien. Then, his gaze shifted to Ellie. "I will also adopt the child beside him," he declared. "She will be my daughter-in-law." It seemed even adopting a child came with a buy-one-get-one-free deal for the Duke. Not only was he taking a boy as his son, but he was also taking the girl beside him as his future daughter-in-law. Ellie was taken aback. This wasn't how the story was supposed to go. Damien's future wife was meant to be the heroine of the original story. But as she looked at Damien, still murmuring her name in his sleep, she realized she couldn't bear to be separated from him either. The thought of staying together brought a surprising surge of joy. The director, however, was horrified. If Ellie left with the Duke, she would surely expose his mistreatment of the children. He knew his life would be forfeit. Desperate, he blurted out Ellie's parentage to the Duke. "That wretched girl is the daughter of a lowly thief," he exclaimed. "Her mother was the thief who stole from Count Leisho's estate." It turned out Ellie's mother had been quite infamous. She'd evaded countless guards, sneaking into the imperial palace itself to steal the emperor's treasures. She was never caught until she was discovered at the count's estate, where she ultimately took her own life. The director continued his tirade, hoping to dissuade the Duke from adopting Ellie. But the Duke didn't listen to a word. "Since when do you tell me what to do?" he snapped. Then, To everyone's astonishment, he knelt before Ellie. "The choice is yours," he said, his eyes sincere. "Will you come with me?" Looking into his eyes, Ellie made a request. "Please dismiss all the teachers here," she said. Even if the Duke adopted her and Damien, the remaining children would still suffer. She wanted the Duke to punish the negligent teachers and appoint responsible caregivers. She didn't want the children to be treated like commodities, bought and sold on a whim. To her surprise, the Duke readily agreed. The director's face paled. He never got another chance to speak. He was dragged away, his fate sealed. The Duke's swift action stunned Ellie. She hadn't expected him to agree so readily. He extended his hand to her once more. "Will you come with me?" "Yes," Ellie replied. "I will," though she didn't understand his reasons for adopting her. The prospect of staying with Damien filled her with a sense of peace. "I'll protect him," she thought, "until he meets the true heroine." With everything settled, Ellie packed her meager belongings. Looking back at the orphanage where she'd spent so many years, Ellie felt a genuine surge of happiness for the children left behind. Finally, they would have a chance at a comfortable and peaceful life. The children Ellie usually cared for came out to see her off, bidding her farewell with palpable reluctance. Watching the genuine joy radiating from the girl, the last vestiges of suspicion faded from the Duke's mind. He had initially wondered if she was a spy planted by the Emperor, but he could see the sincerity in Ellie's devotion to these orphans. The image of a certain woman flickered through his memory again, a nagging sense of familiarity tugging at him. Just then, the Duke spotted Damien, who had been hiding behind a tree, watching them with wary eyes. "Why are you taking Ellie and me away?" Damien demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. "What are you going to do to us?" The Duke explained his intention to adopt Damien as his son, but the boy was vehemently opposed. In Damien's eyes, all adults were cunning and dangerous. His past as a slave, reduced to a plaything for his masters, had left deep scars. He couldn't bear the thought of Ellie suffering a similar fate. "Why are you taking us?" he pressed the Duke, his small frame trembling with anger. In truth, the Duke intended to restore Damien to his rightful place as the young master of the Clyde family, to reclaim all that was rightfully his. Though Damien now resembled a fierce little animal, the Duke knew that once restored to his position, he would be able to protect those he cared for. Ellie had promised to always stay by his side, and he was determined to keep that promise. "You're not allowed to make Ellie do chores," Damien threatened the Duke, his voice surprisingly firm. "Absolutely not." The Duke was speechless. "What kind of person do you take me for?" he finally managed. "And if you dare bully Ellie," Damien continued, undeterred, "I'll never forgive you." With his parting threat delivered, Damien turned and stalked off, leaving the Duke fuming. That boy is just like his father, he thought, his teeth grinding. Charming and sweet only to those he loves, but all teeth and claws to everyone else. How could father and son be so alike? The carriage rolled along at a leisurely pace. The two children dozed, nestled together. Suddenly, a commotion outside the window startled Damien awake. A flock of crows perched on the bare branches of the trees, their eyes glinting ominously. The oppressive, almost terrifying atmosphere sent a shiver down his spine. Have the monsters already spread this far? He wondered, his heart pounding. One crow fluttered against the window, its gaze locking with Ellie's for a brief, unsettling moment. Startled, Ellie quickly turned away. After what felt like an eternity, the carriage finally stopped before a magnificent castle. "Wow," Ellie breathed, awestruck, but her wonderment was quickly replaced by unease as she noticed the crows still circling overhead. She stared, momentarily frozen. The butler, who had been waiting, was taken aback when he learned the Duke had also brought home a future daughter-in-law. He found the situation rather absurd. He couldn't help but sigh, a sound Ellie misinterpreted as disapproval. She was reminded of previous adoptions, where initial affection had turned to disdain once her parentage was revealed. The looks of disgust had always stung, leaving lasting wounds. But now, she was here for Damien, and she had developed a certain immunity to such reactions. To her surprise, the butler's tone shifted. "You didn't inform me beforehand," he said, a hint of apology in his voice. "I haven't even prepared any maids to attend to the young lady." Ellie was startled. "I can take care of myself," she quickly assured him. She didn't want to be seen as a burden. Just then, Antheus informed the Duke that his vassals and relatives were waiting. It seemed news of Damien's return had already spread. Though the Duke had officially adopted Damien, it would be a long time before they truly became a close-knit family. Until then, Those vassals and relatives would be obstacles in Damien's path. Ellie was determined to protect him from any harm. Seeing her room for the first time, Ellie gasped, "Oh my God." The luxurious decor, the exquisite furnishings, and the 10-meter-wide plush bed all screamed one thing: wealth. Ellie was utterly overwhelmed. She turned to pull Damien along with her, only to find 4 maids standing at attention behind her. "My lady," the head maid, Loina, announced, "young Master Damien is with the butler. From today onwards, we are your personal maids." The other maids, Nona, Yaina, and Sasha, greeted Ellie warmly. She dipped into a polite curtsy, a blush warming her cheeks. Having never been waited on in her life, the sudden flurry of attention made her feel a little awkward. The maids, in turn, were charmed by her shy demeanor. Once everything was prepared, it was time for Ellie's bath. The thought of her thin, malnourished body being seen by so many eyes filled her with a fresh wave of shyness. But she resolved to be brave, determined not to let the maids look down on her. Sasha inquired if Ellie had a preference for fragrant oils. Ellie, having never even heard of such a thing, simply replied that hot water was all she needed. "The water at the orphanage was always so cold," she added, unaware of the sudden silence that fell upon the room. Thinking she had said something wrong, Ellie looked up anxiously. "We will endeavor to find a fragrant oil you enjoy, my lady," Loina said, her voice laced with a touch of pity. "And please, don't be so formal with us. We will strive to serve you diligently," she continued, "until you grow tired of us." Finally, bathed and refreshed, Ellie sank into the enormous bed. It had taken far longer to be bathed by someone else than to do it herself, but the feeling of cleanliness was divine. She rolled blissfully back and forth, bumping into a sleeping Damien. With his newly cut hair, he looked even more adorable than usual. Meanwhile, in the conference room, the vassals and relatives of the Hughes family were in an uproar. They were all deeply displeased by Damien's return. After Duke Clyde's death, his merchant guild had been entrusted to Duke Hughes. For 11 years, the Hughes family had managed the guild, amassing a considerable fortune. The prospect of returning it, untouched, to a child of mysterious origins was utterly unacceptable. The Viscount, in particular, was adamant that he would not let such a prize slip through his fingers. Their heated debate was interrupted by the Duke's arrival. "I have found Clyde's son," he announced without preamble. The vassals offered their congratulations, but their true feelings were quickly revealed. "So, this child will be the head of the Clyde family now?" one of them asked pointedly. "That is not possible," the Duke stated firmly. "Damien is too young to manage the family. If he were to return to his estate now, he will be devoured by those vultures." He deftly changed the subject. "I have also brought back a bright young girl," he announced, "and I intend to provide them both with the finest education until they are ready to inherit the Clyde name." This declaration was met with outrage. Why should they nurture their future rivals? But their vehement protests did not sway the Duke. "I have decided to adopt them both," he declared, "and in time they will marry." The Duke had anticipated their schemes. To seize control of the merchant guild, they would resort to any means necessary, from ousting Damien to marrying one of their own daughters to him. By arranging Damien's marriage himself, he would thwart their plans and ensure Damien's inheritance remained protected. "We're going to be husband and wife," Ellie told Damien, her voice filled with a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. Damien, however, looked utterly bewildered. He didn't understand the concept of love. Ellie struggled to explain. "It means when you see the person you love, you feel tingly," she stammered, "like you have a fever, and your heart beats really fast." Damien's eyes widened. "Is that what I feel for Ellie?" He wondered, a sudden bout of hiccups erupting. Flustered, he dodged Ellie's concerned touch. Thinking he was frightened, Ellie gently squeezed his flushed cheeks. Damien stammered, unable to meet her gaze. He mumbled that he was just too hot. To his dismay, Ellie immediately scooted away. "I'll stay over here then," she said. "The bed is big enough anyway." Damien's heart sank. He didn't want to be separated from Ellie. Seeing the boy's crestfallen silence, Ellie asked gently, Are you afraid of having nightmares again, like last time?" Her words struck a chord. To soothe his anxieties, Ellie gently drew Damien into her arms. "There, now you won't have any nightmares," she whispered. "Close your eyes." "Good night, Damien," under a canopy of stars, woven in dreams. The two nestled together, sleeping soundly. But in the shadows, dark ambitions were stirring. The Viscount, having dispatched spies, discovered that Ellie's mother had been the thief who stole the Emperor's jewels. He sneered, "A nobody of a boy and the daughter of a lowly thief. A match made in heaven," he thought sarcastically. "Those brats," he muttered. "How dare they try to take the merchant guild I've worked so hard for all these years? That thief's daughter must be eliminated." A wicked plot began to form in his mind. The next morning, Ellie was roused early to be dressed and prepared. Today was the day she and Damien would meet the elders and vassals. Dressed in a pink gown, Ellie looked even more sweet and innocent. Even the maids were captivated by her beauty. Ellie, however, found being waited on more tiring than doing things herself. She sat on the sofa, waiting for Damien, when the Viscount suddenly arrived, requesting a visit. Ignoring the maid's attempts to stop him, he barged in, looking down at Ellie with undisguised disdain. Arrogance practically radiated from him. Ellie, sensing his hostility, nevertheless offered him polite greeting, a smile fixed on her face. The Viscount announced that he had come to present Miss Ellie with a precious gift, a spirit stone called Azure Hope, a rare and expensive gem. This, of course, was the centerpiece of the Viscount's plan to frame Ellie. If she was a thief's daughter, he reasoned, then all he had to do was make it look like she stole something. A smile plastered on his face. His mind churned with malicious intent. His sudden, early morning visit, offering a dazzling spirit stone, along with his insistence on dismissing the head maid, raised Ellie's suspicions. As soon as Loina was gone, the Viscount dropped his pretense. "Don't even think about it," he sneered. "This isn't something you can even dream of possessing." Ellie rolled her eyes. "I knew you weren't being nice," she thought. "But I'm a generous man," the Viscount continued, a cruel glint in his eye. "If you want to look at it, go ahead, feast your eyes." He instructed Ellie to hand it to the other maid when she was finished. With that, he abruptly left, leaving Ellie utterly bewildered. Loina returned, informing Ellie that it was time to go. Ellie rose to leave, but the Viscount's maid had her orders. She was to slip the spirit stone into Ellie's pocket, framing her for theft. Clutching the stone, the maid excused herself and approached Ellie. Feigning a stumble, she lurched towards the girl, slipping the stone into Ellie's pocket amidst the contrived chaos. Her movements were smooth, her acting impeccable. Loina, preoccupied with checking if Ellie was hurt, seemed not to notice anything amiss. Ellie, too, appeared oblivious. She went over to the maid, asking if she was all right and even brushing off some dust from her clothes. Once everything seemed settled, they finally headed to the meeting hall. Ellie introduced herself to the assembled vassals, only to be met with derisive laughter. A commoner without even a family name, one scoffed. Damien bristled with anger. "Hey," he shouted, but the Duke silenced him with a look. Until he had the power to protect himself, it was best to remain quiet and avoid trouble. Just then, the Viscount sauntered in, fashionably late. As soon as he entered, he announced his intention to show the Duke the precious spirit stone. But the Viscount's maid whispered something in his ear. "What do you mean the spirit stone is gone?" The Viscount bellowed, feigning shock. All eyes turned to him. The maid stammered. "Well, after that young lady finished admiring it, she didn't return it to me." The implication hung heavy in the air. Ellie had stolen it. As if anticipating this, the Viscount seized the opportunity to reveal Ellie's supposed secret. Her mother, he announced dramatically, was a notorious thief. The room erupted in a cacophony of murmurs. The vassals were aghast. They couldn't accept the daughter of a thief living amongst them. Duke Clyde, however, saw through the Viscount charade. "You're putting on quite a show," he thought, his expression unreadable. Undeterred, the Viscount pressed his advantage. "We must search her," he declared. "We must catch her red-handed." The Viscount, driven by his greed for the Clyde family fortune, was determined to frame Ellie and drive her out. He had planted the precious gem in her pocket, using his maid as a pawn. Now, in front of everyone, he accused her of theft and demanded a search, hoping to expose her crime. Ellie trembled, fear gripping her. She insisted she hadn't stolen anything, but the Viscount was relentless. Seeing that her words were falling on deaf ears, Ellie agreed to be searched, but on one condition. If the gem wasn't found, the Viscount would apologize. He smirked and gestured for his maid to begin. The maid searched Ellie thoroughly, but the spirit stone was nowhere to be found. Confusion clouded her face. It should have been there. She turned to the Viscount, shaking her head. He was furious. He shoved the maid aside and searched Ellie himself, but to no avail. Murmurs rippled through the room. Doubts began to surface about the Viscount's accusations. Enraged, the Viscount grabbed Ellie's arm, his grip tightening. "Where is it?" he hissed. "Where did you hide it?" Damien surged forward, ready to intervene. But Duke Clyde was faster. He seized the Viscount's wrist, his voice dangerously low. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded. "It seems to me you're the one with something to hide." He turned to Antheus. "Search him," he commanded. The Viscount, moments before so confident, now paled. Antheus's hand dipped in the Viscount's pocket, and his face hardened. He withdrew the missing spirit stone. The Viscount sputtered, his protests weak and unconvincing. "This isn't mine. I swear, I don't know how it got there." But Ellie knew. She had known all along. Though the stone was light, she had felt it when a maid slipped it into her pocket. When a maid had fallen, Ellie had helped her up, discreetly transferring the stone back into the maid's pocket. Then, during the search, she had palmed it again, waiting for the perfect moment to slip it into the Viscount's pocket when he searched her himself. She had anticipated their every move. They had underestimated her. The Viscount and his maid paid dearly for their attempted frame-up. Ellie looked away, a flicker of sadness in her eyes. But she knew she couldn't afford to be soft. Her survival depended on it. The vassals who had mocked her earlier now trembled, falling to their knees and begging for forgiveness. Duke Clyde waved them away, his focus shifting back to the matter at hand. He reiterated his intention for Ellie and Damien to marry. However, the law forbade nobles from marrying commoners. To elevate Ellie's status, he announced his plan to find a noble family to adopt her. Ellie and the vassals stared at him, stunned. Which noble family would adopt the daughter of a thief? She had been scorned and rejected her entire life, insulted and bullied by nobles for her lowly birth. And now, the most powerful duke in the empire was taking her in, making her the future bride of his adopted son. He was even offering her the chance to choose a noble family to give her a name, transforming her into a true noble lady. Just then, a maid rushed in with urgent news. Baroness Amanta's condition had suddenly worsened. Upon hearing this, the Baron panicked and hastily excused himself to rush home. Ellie felt a flicker of recognition at the name. Then it clicked. Baron Amanta owned a small mine. A particular mineral from that mine had been forged into a magnificent sword. In the original story, it was that very sword that Damien would wield to win a crucial victory in the war. In a region ravaged by monsters, weapons were as good as gold. Ellie, without hesitation, chose the Amanta family. The Duke offered a word of caution. "If you want the Baron to accept you," he said, his gaze piercing, "the little tricks you pulled earlier won't suffice." Ellie's heart skipped a beat. Had the Duke seen through her manipulation of the Viscount? Then why didn't he expose me? She wondered. Is it because I helped him find Damien? Because I'm useful to him? If that were true, then the Duke was the only person who recognized her true capabilities. A steely resolve hardened Ellie's expression. "I will prove my worth," she vowed silently. A few days later, Ellie and Damien were playing in the greenhouse garden. Damien, immediately captivated by a patch of dandelions, looked up from the vibrant blooms and eagerly beckoned Ellie over. "These flowers are the same color as your hair," he exclaimed. Ellie laughed, delighted. Pointing to a cluster of nearby blue blossoms, she said, "And your eyes are the same clear blue as these. Aren't they pretty?" Damien gazed at Ellie, her smile radiating innocent joy. Ellie then told him that she would soon be adopted. "Does that mean I won't see you anymore?" Damien asked anxiously. Ellie reassured him that she would only be taking a new last name, and that they wouldn't be separated. Relieved, Damien's sweet smile returned, captivating as ever. Knowing that Damien's lessons would begin the following day, they decided to make the most of their remaining free time, playing hide-and-seek amongst the vibrant foliage. Happy times always seemed to fly by too quickly. Dusk settled as they finally emerged from the garden, breathless and exhilarated. As they turned to head back, a strange sound drifted from the small woods nearby. Suddenly, a large, dark figure appeared before them. Lost in their game, the two children had completely forgotten the time. The unsettling noise from the woods continued. As if on cue, something unexpected happened. A huge, shadowy figure emerged. Instinctively, Ellie shielded Damien, but the anticipated danger didn't materialize. Instead, they saw a woman slumped on the ground, trembling. She muttered repeatedly, "I'm so scared, so cold." Ellie approached her. "Madam," she asked gently, Are you all right? Her attire didn't resemble that of a servant. Ellie decided to help her back to the greenhouse. But as she touched the woman's hand, she froze. Her skin was icy cold, and her emotional state seemed unstable. Acting rashly could be dangerous. Ellie introduced herself warmly and asked the woman her name. The woman, however, seemed disoriented and couldn't recall it. A thought struck Ellie. Could she have Roman disease? She wondered. The disease caused gradual memory loss, eventually leading to dementia. It was incurable. Ellie wrapped her scarf around the woman, telling her about a warm place nearby filled with flowers. The woman's interest was piqued. Together, Ellie and Damien helped her back to the greenhouse. The woman seemed to be feeling better. She had no recollection of how she ended up in the woods. Just as she was murmuring, about to reveal her name, an anxious male voice called out, "Biola, what are you doing here? Do you know how long I've been looking for you?" Ellie turned to see Baron Amanta rushing towards them. So, this woman was the Baroness. Biola, recognizing the Baron, apologized for getting lost. Though his words were scolding, the Baron's tone towards his wife, Biola, was gentle. But the next instant, his gaze snapped to Ellie, sharp with anger and disgust. "I don't know what game you're playing," he accused, "but don't you dare exploit my wife's illness for your own despicable ends." Ellie felt a surge of injustice. The Baron had completely misunderstood. She had no ulterior motive in approaching his wife. Seeing Ellie unjustly accused, Damien immediately jumped to her defense. "Be nicer to Ellie," he demanded. "Kind people don't yell at her like that." Damien's outburst startled Ellie. She quickly recalled the original storyline. Baron Amanta was destined to become Damien's tutor. He couldn't afford to offend his future teacher. Ellie quickly intervened, urging Damien to calm down. Seeing the young boy so readily obey Ellie, the Baron couldn't resist another sarcastic jab. "This little girl is certainly adept at winning people over," he sneered. "But it won't work on me. I will not adopt you, and I ask you to stay away from my wife." With that, he swept away, supporting Biola, leaving Ellie standing there, stunned. She hadn't anticipated such open hostility. His dislike for her was one thing, but she couldn't risk him extending that animosity to Damien. Ellie gently explained to Damien that he shouldn't be hostile towards everyone. Damien looked confused. "But didn't you say I should stand up for myself when someone is bullying me?" he asked. "That man was mean to you, and that's like being mean to me. Was I wrong to speak up?" Seeing the boy's crestfallen expression, Ellie couldn't bring herself to scold him further. Damien had only just begun to open up. She couldn't contradict herself now. Switching to praise mode, she said, "Damien, you did great." A bright smile instantly lit up the boy's face. Damien simply struggled with social interactions. With proper guidance, he would learn to differentiate between situations. He would learn to navigate the complexities of emotions. As a precaution, Ellie added, "But next time, if I tell you to stop, you must listen to me, okay?" Damien nodded obediently, looking even more endearing. Just then, a maid came hurrying towards them, calling out their names urgently. The kind girl who had rescued the amnesiac woman was now mistakenly perceived by the woman's husband as having ulterior motives. Even the maid advised Ellie to keep her distance from the Baroness. After all, there was no telling what unpredictable actions the Baroness might take during her episodes of memory loss. Ellie inquired about the cause of the Baroness's illness. Apparently, the Baroness had been perfectly healthy in her youth, but her health had deteriorated steadily after the birth of her son. Ellie felt a pang of worry. Was there truly no cure for this ailment? Later that evening, the Baron couldn't help but voice his frustration. He had assigned so many servants to attend to his wife, yet she had still managed to wander off. Looking at his ailing wife, guilt gnawed at him. The joy he had felt anticipating her pregnancy was now eclipsed by the pain of her suffering. The Empire held no cure for this disease. Biola's condition continued to worsen. Then, one day, he found her unconscious near a cliff edge. He was devastated. It had been his desire for a child that had trapped Biola, a woman who cherished her freedom above all else. He wondered if her frequent memory lapses were a subconscious attempt to escape her reality. Seeing her husband's anguish, Biola tried to comfort him. "That kind girl with the golden hair helped me today," she said. "She gave me her scarf and took me to a warm place. I would still be out there shivering if it weren't for her. She's a true angel." Her genuine smile stunned the Baron. It had been so long since he had seen her like this. Biola took his hand. Let's go see those children tomorrow, she suggested, and apologize to them, all right? Though the Baron still doubted the sincerity of Ellie's kindness, his wife's hopeful expression weighed heavily on his heart. After a long silence, he finally agreed. Meanwhile, Ellie was occupied with gently pinching Damien's cheeks, their soft, springy texture reminding her of marshmallows. Noticing Damien's bashful reaction, Ellie took his hand and placed it against her own cheek. The unexpected intimacy caused Damien's mind to go blank. Just then, the headmaid arrived to announce the arrival of Baron and Baroness Amanta. Upon entering, the couple bowed deeply. The Baron expressed his sincere remorse for misunderstanding Ellie and Damien, apologizing profusely. Ellie was taken aback by the unexpected apology. She suddenly realized why the Baron wouldn't focus on his mining operations until much later in the story. It must have been due to his preoccupation with his wife's health. If she could alleviate his worries, perhaps he could create Damien's sword sooner. Accepting the Baron's apology, Ellie made a request. I've heard that those suffering from Roman's disease are easily agitated and become frightened by loud noises, she said. So, Baron Amanta, please don't be angry with your wife anymore. Because of a single sentence from his wife, the Baron had come to apologize to a girl he clearly disliked. Ellie accepted the apology and then made a request. She asked if she could accompany the Baroness on walks. Being new to the ducal city, her only friend was Damien. Since Damien would soon be busy with swordsmanship lessons, she hoped to spend time with the Baroness to alleviate her boredom. 3 visits a week would suffice. Ellie's motive was to encourage the Baron to focus on his mining operations, so that Damien's sword could be forged sooner. The Baroness, however, worried that her episodes might burden Ellie, but seeing the girl's sincere plea, she happily agreed. One afternoon, the two shared tea in the greenhouse garden. Ellie recounted her journey to the ducal city. Learning about Ellie's past hardships, the Baroness felt a pang of sympathy. Taking Ellie's hand, she said, "You've been through so much, haven't you?" Although Ellie tried to appear nonchalant, the Baroness's gentle concern touched her deeply. "It wasn't so bad," she replied with a smile. "The children at the orphanage were good, and the Duke took care of those awful teachers." The Baroness seemed surprised. "The Duke isn't one to meddle in such affairs," she remarked. "But then again, he did rescue Damien from the orphanage." Hesitating for a moment, she added, "Perhaps it was out of guilt." The Baroness then shared a story about the Duke. Duke Zuez and Damien's father, Duke Clyde, had met during a great war and become the closest of friends. The Empire had emerged victorious, successfully subjugating the minority clans who possessed spiritual powers. However, on the day of Duke Zuez's triumphant return, he brought a woman with him. Her name was Yulia, and she was a member of a minority clan. The Zuez family suffered from a generational curse of manic episodes. Yulia, however, possessed the spiritual power to heal this affliction. They eventually married and lived happily together. But using her powers came at a cost. 3 years later, when the Duke was called upon to fight another war, Yulia, in an attempt to completely eradicate the Duke's curse, sacrificed her own life. Devastated, Duke Zuez closed himself off from the world. Only his dear friend, Duke Clyde, persisted in contacting him, sending him letters. 2 years later, when Damien was born, Clyde shared the joyous news with Zuez. Reinvigorated, Duke Zuez reopened the city gates. Tragically, however, Duke Clyde and his wife were assassinated by the Emperor's agents while en route to the ducal city. Finally, Ellie understood the source of the Duke's guilt towards Damien, because she felt that if she hadn't invited Clyde and his family, this tragedy wouldn't have happened. Ellie understood that feeling, having experienced the loss of loved ones herself. Seeing the girl's silence, Biela worried she had upset her. Stroking Ellie's hair, she changed the subject. "Spending time with you like this reminds me of my son," she said. "Though he's quite grown up now, always busy managing the mine." At the mention of the mine, Ellie's ears perked up. She wanted to ask Biela to take her to see it. Meanwhile, the Baron's son, Jarrett, was frowning deeply. He had unearthed a new type of ore, but he couldn't figure out how to utilize it. He felt utterly useless. Unable to please his ailing mother or earn his father's approval. Just then, the Baron appeared, inquiring about his son's progress. Jarrett's reaction spoke volumes. The Baron tried to offer some comfort, saying there was no rush. But Jarrett remained resolute. "I'll work harder, father. I won't disappoint you," he declared. His son's distant demeanor startled the Baron, and he swallowed his words of encouragement. Turning, he bumped into Ellie. The Baron was surprised to find his wife and Ellie at the mine. Biela, knowing her husband would disapprove of her being in such a dangerous place, explained that she had wanted to see her son. Meanwhile, Ellie's attention was captivated by a short sword. Mesmerized by its gleam, she longed to touch it. Looking at Jarrett with hopeful eyes, she asked, "May I?" But Jarrett refused outright. "No, it's dangerous," he said. Ellie's face fell. Her evident disappointment softened Jarrett's resolve. "I can show you something else, though," he offered. The Baron started to object, but Biela stopped him. Jarrett pulled out a monocle crafted from spirit stone and offered it to Ellie. The moment she put it on, the world spun around her. Closing one, I helped steady her vision. Watching them interact, Biela mused that this must be what it felt like to have a granddaughter. Just then, Ellie spotted a pile of blue, or Jarrett quickly warned her not to touch it. He explained that this particular or hardened upon contact with human skin, clinging stubbornly and even emitting a strange substance. Ellie was alarmed. It sounded just like the monsters Damien had encountered before, impossible to shake off once touched. Hearing this, Jarrett suddenly remembered seeing a similar creature when he was a child. He was just a young knight then, and he had reached out to touch a shimmering pile of minerals by the roadside. Someone had stopped him, explaining that it was a rare type of mist-like mushroom that lured people in with its glittering appearance. Once touched, it was impossible to remove, even capable of burrowing into the body. This revelation sparked a lively discussion between father and son. Ellie felt a surge of satisfaction. Her subtle hints had finally paid off. They had finally realized that the mine was actually a nest of these fungal creatures. Now, they would surely begin researching how to weaponize them. Lost in thought, Ellie was startled when Biela announced it was time to return. Though she hadn't had much of a chance to speak with her son, just seeing him had been enough. Biela expressed her deep gratitude to Ellie. The girl had been a tremendous help, not only to her, but to her husband and son as well. She was like an angel. Despite having the Duke's support, Ellie's low birth still drew disdain from the nobility. However, she cleverly navigated the social landscape, winning over the Baroness. As the steward reported on Ellie's progress to the Duke considered Ellie to be quite a spirited child. Just then, the steward brought in the sword the Baron had recently crafted. The material used was, in fact, a type of monster disguised as ore. The Duke was immensely pleased with this development, but the steward revealed that it was thanks to Ellie. A casual remark of hers had led the Baron to realize the ore's true nature. This gave the Duke pause. He had initially taken Ellie in because he suspected she was the Emperor's spy, sent to sway Damien's loyalty to the crown. If his investigation proved Ellie's connection to the Emperor, he would certainly. But why did the mere thought of it unsettle him so? A noise at the door startled him. The steward instantly drew his dagger, approaching cautiously. But it was only Ellie. That was close. She'd been trying to eavesdrop on their conversation about the weapon's development and nearly got caught. The Duke asked what she wanted. Holding up a small bag, Ellie replied, "I brought you medicine, Your Grace. I heard from the maids that you often have headaches, so I brought you something for them." The steward praised her thoughtfulness. "Where did you get this medicine?" he inquired. Ellie stammered, unable to admit that he had given it to her when she was feigning illness. Changing the subject, she asked, "Steward, what are you hiding behind your back?" The steward quickly dropped the dagger and held up his empty hands. Nothing at all." Ellie was about to hand the medicine to the steward when the Duke snatched it from her. "You didn't come here just for this, did you?" he said pointedly. You're perceptive," Ellie admitted, deciding to be straightforward. She wanted to be adopted by a different family. The Duke was taken aback. "The Baron is almost ready to accept you, and you want to give that up?" Expecting refusal, Ellie was surprised when he agreed. "Which family do you have in mind?" he asked. "The Zuez family. I want you to adopt me." She reasoned that she would eventually leave anyway, so he might as well take her in for a while. But the Duke flatly refused. "Don't even think about it. I detest troublesome matters," he stated. Rejected so curtly, Ellie retreated to her room. Looking at the children's medicine she had brought, the Duke found it amusing. She had actually tried to treat a curse-induced headache with children's medicine. What was she playing at? He knew she was likely the Emperor's spy, yet he couldn't help but be intrigued by her. Betrothed to a young nobleman, She spent her days plotting her escape. Ellie calculated the timeline of events. Damien would go to war in 4 years, and the heroine would return 5 years after that. She had 9 years to secure her future. Despite her plans to leave, she continued to guide Damien's development. That day, Ellie and Biela went to the training grounds to see Damien. As thanks for Ellie's help of the mind, the Baron had decided to personally instruct Damien in swordsmanship. Ellie was slightly worried. Damien had resented the Baron for his previous hostility towards her. Just in case, she decided to speak with him first. Opening the door, she found Damien slumped on the floor. Rushing to his side, she cried, "Damien, are you hurt?" Cupping his face in her hands, she anxiously examined him. "I'm not hurt," he reassured her, "just a little tired." Relieved, Ellie glanced at the young sparring partners. "Is your training this intense?" Damien is still a child. Were they looking down on him, deliberately pushing him too hard? "I'll be checking in on you regularly from now on," she declared. "I'll know if anyone is bullying you." Perhaps afraid she would worry, Damien quickly insisted he wasn't tired. "Don't you want me to come see you?" she teased. "Of course I do." Damien instantly transformed into a cuddly, pleading kitten. "I'm practically dying of exhaustion," he declared dramatically. "But when you're with me, I'm not tired at all. So you absolutely have to come." The two children's adorable antics made the Baroness laugh heartily. Even the nearby sparring partners were charmed. Just then, the Baron arrived at the training grounds. Thanks to Ellie's assistance, his attitude towards her had softened considerably. He even brought her a gift, a bow and arrows crafted from the monster, or it looked incredibly valuable. However, compared to a bow, a sword was far more practical on the battlefield. "You're right," the Baron conceded, "but our current skill isn't sufficient to create a sword from this material. Perhaps Wayberk could manage it." Wayberk was a renowned swordsmith in the ducal city, but also an eccentric. He was blind in one eye and losing sight in the other, yet he stubbornly refused medical treatment. Ellie was about to inquire further, but stopped herself, realizing it would seem too deliberate. The Baron likely wouldn't reveal more anyway. She would investigate Wayberk on her own. As the Baron began training with Damien, Ellie turned to leave. Damien followed her. He didn't want to train with the Baron, still resentful of the Baron's previous harsh treatment of Ellie. He loathed anyone who was unkind to her. The boy's love for the girl ran deep. He detested anyone who spoke ill of her. The boy's pure affection touched Ellie, but also filled her with a sense of helplessness. She reassured him, "It's all right, Damien. The Baron is someone you can trust. He'll help you a great deal." Damien trusted Ellie implicitly. His obedient nature made Ellie's heart ache. The thought of him suffering because of her circumstances pained her. She felt a pang of guilt for the hardships he endured. But as long as Damien grew stronger and earned the Zuez family's recognition through his own merit, no one would dare to mistreat her openly. Damien and the Baron were sparring intensely when a steward arrived at the training grounds. It was Damien's first day of training, and he naturally wanted to observe. He was impressed by how well Damien was holding his own. Ellie showed the steward the gift the Baron had given her. "It's a bow and arrows made from the newly discovered monster, or," she explained, hoping to impress him with the Baron's newfound goodwill. But the steward's reaction was subdued. He, too, had come bearing a gift. Hidden behind him was a bow Damien had intended to give Ellie. The Baron had beaten him to it. The sparring match abruptly stopped. Damien seemed to be losing. Ellie started to approach, but then held back. Damien had to grow up. He needed to earn the family's approval on his own. The Baron hadn't intended to get so serious, but the sparring had escalated without him realizing it. Although Damien's swordsmanship was clumsy, his perception and anticipation were remarkably sharp. He had already trained extensively with the knights, yet he still had the stamina to fight him to this point. He'd heard that Damien had fought monsters as a slave. Had those experiences shaped him? Damien stumbled and fell, his muscles cramping from exhaustion. But his defiant gaze remained fixed on the Baron. "Your attacks are powerful," he gasped, "but your sword, it can't protect anyone yet." Goaded by the Baron's words, Damien shakily rose to his feet. His eyes, blazing with fighting spirit and determination, met the Baron's. A moment later, his sword clattered to the ground, disarmed. "Let's end it here for today. Time to rest," the Baron declared. "You're riddled with weaknesses. You have no chance of winning." Watching Damien's silent dejection, Ellie clenched her fists, worry etched on her face. The Baron noticed the concern in her eyes. He finally understood why the Duke had brought Ellie back. The boy had been soundly defeated, humiliated by the Baron's prowess. He was still too weak. too weak to protect the girl he cared for. Ellie, fearing the blow to Damien's confidence, started to approach him with words of comfort. But Damien looked at her, his gaze resolute. "I will train harder," he vowed. "I will become strong." Ellie, taken aback for a moment, then smiled with relief. Her worry had been unnecessary. The boy already had his own goal. Damien's desire for strength stemmed from a deep-seated need to protect someone precious to him. Ellie, ever practical, reminded him, "You need to eat well. Don't be picky. A healthy body is essential. You could even take on 17 opponents." One day, the two children were walking in the snow. Damien, mimicking Ellie, puffed out clouds of white breath. "So cute," she thought, wanting to pinch his cheeks. They were about to continue their walk when a maid stopped them. Her unusually keen sense of smell had detected a nauseating stench. She led the children to a lake with crimson water. "This is the Red Lake," she explained. "Many have been lured to their deaths by its captivating color. And it's enchanted. It can't be filled in. So, young master, young miss, you must never play near here. Do you understand?" she asked, looking at both Damien and Ellie. "You must promise me, Miss Ellie." Ellie brushed it off. "I'm not a child." Suddenly, a noise came from a small cabin by the lake. With a bang, the door flew open. An eye patch-wearing, blood-stained man stumbled out. Ellie instinctively shielded Damien, her eyes fixed on the stranger. She was about to demand his identity when he took several large gulps from a bottle. The maid addressed him. "It's been a while. Do you remember me?" The man glanced at the children. "I believe I told you it's dangerous to bring children here." The maid began to explain, but suddenly clamped a hand over her nose and mouth. The stench emanating from a man was suffocating. "Forgive me, Mr. Wayburk," she choked out. "We'll leave now." Wayburk, the name sounded familiar. Wasn't that the master swordsmith the Baron had mentioned? Back at the Duke's mansion, Ellie bombarded the maid with questions. Was it the man who makes swords? Is he no longer crafting them because he's blind? The maid's explanation revealed the truth. Wyberg's daughter had drowned in the Red Lake, but his despair hadn't begun then. It was after the Duchess Yulia's death that he'd succumbed to his drinking habit. Duchess Yulia had been around the same age as his daughter. After his daughter's death, she had often kept him company, helping him through his grief. But after Yulia's passing, Wayburg had sought solace in alcohol, refusing all medical treatment. As they parted ways, the maid reiterated her warning. Never go near the Red Lake again. But Ellie, with her rebellious spirit, had no intention of obeying. "Please, miss, don't go near the lake," the maid pleaded. "Don't worry, I won't," Ellie replied sweetly. But obedience wasn't in her nature. That man was a key piece of the puzzle. She had to investigate. Early the next morning, Ellie stood alone by the shores of the Red Lake. She happened to see a man emerge from the cabin. It was the physician who had come to treat Wayburg. Ellie was about to approach and inquire about Wayburg's condition when she froze, overhearing the man's conversation. The physician was reporting to a viscount. He was deceiving Wayburg, pretending to treat his eye, while slowly poisoning it, blinding him completely. This way, Wayburg wouldn't be able to forge the powerful swords the Duke needed. Once the Zuez family's military power weakened, everything in the ducal city would belong to the Quintal family, like a magical orb ripe for the taking. The Viscount, on the other end, repeatedly stressed that Wayburg must never see the new or the Baron had discovered. Hidden behind a tree, Ellie listened to their treacherous plot unfold. She couldn't let them succeed. Wayburg, waking from a drunken stupor, opened the cabin door to find a small child squatting by the lake. He rushed forward and pulled Ellie up. "Are you crazy? Do you know how dangerous this place is?" His instinctive reaction fueled his outburst. But Ellie, unfazed, greeted him with a bright smile. Wayburg asked her what she was doing there. Ellie held up the bow, an arrow she carried. "This is a gift I received. Isn't it cool?" The man's gaze was instantly drawn to the blue arrowhead. He stared, transfixed. Ellie's plan to pique his interest with the oar was working perfectly. Wanting a closer look at the oar, Wayburg led Ellie inside the cabin. The interior was a mess, littered with overturned bottles. As Ellie surveyed the chaotic scene, her mind raced, replaying the physician's plot. They were planning to use Wayburg's failing eyesight to undermine the Duke. She couldn't allow his condition to worsen. Her eyes fell on a bottle of strangely colored liquid on the table. It looked suspicious. She had to investigate. I'll take this back with me, she decided. Wayberk moved to open a window, then paused, watching Ellie lost in thought. He turned and lit the stove instead. Ellie began to chat with him, encouraging him to drink less and eat properly to regain his health and embrace a new life. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to him like that. He told Ellie about his daughter, who had drowned in the Red Lake. He blamed himself, convinced that if he had warned her about the lake's dangers, the accident wouldn't have happened. Ellie interrupted him. It wasn't your fault. She spoke of her own mother. If it hadn't been for her, her mother might not have resorted to thievery. Ellie had blamed herself too, but her mother had always reassured her, it's not your fault. If your daughter could see you now, Ellie said, she would tell you the same thing. It wasn't your fault. Consumed by guilt over his daughter's death, Wayberk had been unable to forgive himself. But the young girl's words rekindled a spark of hope within him. It's not your fault. Looking at Ellie, he remembered Lady Yulia saying the same thing years ago. They were so alike. As dusk settled, Ellie prepared to leave. She and Wayberk agreed that he would keep the arrow, to examine overnight and return it to her the next day. No problem. Where do you live? He asked. The ducal city. Before he could react, Ellie darted away. Wayberk assumed she was a servant from the ducal city. He planned to study the arrowhead's material carefully. He became so engrossed that he worked through the night. It's a shame to return it so soon, he thought. I haven't fully figured out this mineral yet. It had been a long time since Wayberk had ventured into the ducal city. In my current state, it would be humiliating to run into the Duke, Wayberk thought anxiously. As he nervously approached the gates of the ducal city, 2 guards stopped him. Strange attire, carrying a sword. Doesn't look like a good sort, one muttered. Wayberk was struggling to explain himself when, just in time, Baroness Biela arrived. Wayberk, it's been a while. Inside Wayberk's surprisingly opulent drawing room, the Baron, Ellie, and Damien were waiting for him. Ellie greeted him enthusiastically. Uncle. Wayberk was taken aback by the situation. The Baron was equally surprised. Wayberk, what are you doing here? Ellie explained. This uncle is a friend of mine. He's very interested in the arrow you gave me. Since you also make weapons, I thought I'd introduce you so you could exchange ideas. The 2 men exchanged bewildered glances. What a coincidence. The Baron eyed Ellie suspiciously. Ellie quickly changed the subject, asking Wayberk about his progress with the arrow. As soon as the topic shifted to weaponry, the 2 men became engrossed in discussion. Ellie smiled triumphantly. Her plan was proceeding smoothly. Damien, assuming Ellie's delight stemmed from the hot cocoa, thoughtfully pushed his cup towards her. Such a sweet boy. The men's conversation turned to forging the ore into swords. The Baron excitedly invited Wayberk to collaborate, but noticing Wayberk's blind eye, the Baron's expression turned somber. Your eye, it doesn't look good. Are you still refusing treatment? Wayberk was confused. What are you talking about? I've been receiving treatment. Dr. Dillon even prescribed me medicine. Suddenly, Wayberk realized something was amiss. Preoccupied with his research, he'd forgotten to take his medicine today. Yet, he could see more clearly than usual. Could there be something wrong with the medicine? His expression turned serious. Baron, there's something I need to ask you. The Duke, despite claiming to find children annoying, found himself constantly thinking about the little girl. Even during meetings, he fidgeted with the headache medicine she had given him. He barely paid attention to his advisor's reports, his mind filled with her innocent smile. The scheming Viscount Quintal saw his opportunity. He presented the Duke with a newly crafted sword. Monsters are rampant, and Wayberk is going blind. He can no longer forge swords, the Viscount pointed out. He was certain the Duke, under pressure, would be forced to use his family's swords, giving him control of the ducal city's weapon production. But the Duke ignored him, turning to Baron Amanta. How is the development of the new mineral progressing? Very smoothly, Your Grace. As far as I know, you've only produced arrows. But knights use swords. Do you intend to hunt with arrows? The Viscount sneered. The Baron could only grit his teeth. The Duke turned to the physician, inquiring about Wayberk's condition. Quintal shot the physician a meaningful look. He's the same, Your Grace. Refusing treatment, the physician replied. The Duke pondered for a moment, then took the sword from the Viscount. He examined it closely, running his fingers along the sharp blade. Just as the Viscount was about to gloat, a frantic knocking interrupted them. A maid burst in, calling for the physician. Miss Ellie used the eye drops you prescribed. She's screaming in pain. The physician was dumbfounded. He hadn't prescribed Ellie any eye drops. Then the maid held out the bottle, and his blood ran cold. Wasn't that the medicine he'd given Wayberg? The poison he'd made with water from the Red Lake, intended to blind Wayberg completely? How did that little brat get her hands on it? That girl was the future Duchess. If anything happened to her, he was doomed. The physician scrambled to check on Ellie. In his panic, the physician blurted out, But it's a poison harmful to the human body." He realized his mistake too late. Wayberg, his face grim, stood before him. "You said this is poison?" The physician, terrified by nature, seeing his deception exposed, confessed everything. "I was only following orders. Viscount Quintal made me do it." Viscount Quintal, aghast at his bumbling accomplice, frantically denied any involvement. But the physician produced their communication orb and played the recording of their conversation for all to hear. The Duke, who had been seemingly distracted, suddenly snapped to attention. He stroked the sword's blade, his gaze icy as he fixed it on Viscount Quintal. His pupils turned a blood red, a chilling sign. Only blood could appease the savage urge rising within him. Quintal's face drained of color. A sword now rested against his throat. The Duke, holding the blade, radiated a terrifying, bloodthirsty aura. Consumed by his curse, he craved blood to quell the rising madness. Seeing the Duke on the verge of losing control, Baron Amanta, fearing a massacre, moved to intervene. But Wayberg stepped forward, offering the Duke his own finely crafted sword. He felt a flicker of anxiety. It had been a decade since he last forged a blade. Would the Duke find it lacking? But the Duke had been waiting for this. He grasped the sword and, with a single, swift stroke, ended Viscount Quintal's life. He then commanded Wayberg to expedite the production of new weapons. Seeing the Duke held no ill will towards him, Wayberg declared resolutely, "I won't disappoint you, Your Grace." Baron Amanta was satisfied with this outcome. Now that blood had been shed, the Duke's madness should subside. But the bloodlust lingered. Handing the sword to Amanta, the Duke abruptly rushed out. He flung open a door. Ellie, seeing the Duke, greeted him with a smile. He rushed to her, gripping her shoulders. "I heard you got some strange medicine in your eyes. Does it still hurt?" Seeing the girl's slightly guilty expression, the Duke instantly understood. It had all been Ellie's plan. Ellie, noticing the bloodstains on the Duke, also realized his part of the plan had gone smoothly. Baron Amanta, having followed the Duke, arrived and practically dragged the Duke from the room. Seeing the vibrant green of Ellie's eyes, the Duke finally allowed himself to be led away. Amanta offered a handkerchief. "Your Grace, please wipe the blood off." The Duke was driving him to distraction. Amanta couldn't help but scold him gently. "The young lady is just a child. She'll be frightened by the blood." The Duke finally noticed the blood on his hands. A maid approached with a vial. "Your Grace, you dropped this." The Duke pocketed the vial, clutching it like a precious treasure. Looking at the handkerchief, he asked, "Do other knights carry these?" "Of course not, Your Grace." The Duke immediately ordered Amanta to issue handkerchiefs to every knight, so they could always clean any bloodstains. Then, he imagined Ellie using the handkerchief, the rough fabric scratching her delicate skin. Unacceptable. They must be the softest material, embroidered with beautiful patterns. Only such a handkerchief is worthy of Ellie. With that, the Duke departed. Amanta and the maid exchanged bewildered glances. What had come over the Duke? The young Duke was already experiencing pangs of jealousy. The mere thought of his beloved Ellie glancing at another child filled him with anxiety. Hearing someone praise her beauty, he glared. "How dare you covet Ellie's beauty?" Finally, the two children, Ellie and Damien, arrived at the bustling marketplace. The vibrant scene immediately captivated their attention. Preparing for a future where she could stand on her own 2 feet, Ellie took the opportunity to conduct some market research. Taking Damien's hand, she reminded him, "It's crowded here. Don't let go." Damien pouted. "So if it wasn't crowded, you wouldn't hold my hand?" Ellie, utterly charmed by his childish complaint, replied, "If you want, we can hold hands forever." Damien, reassured, beamed. Hand in hand, they strolled through the market, sampling treats as they went. When Damien accidentally smeared sauce on his cheek, a nearby guard promptly offered a handkerchief. The hulking man and the dainty handkerchief presented a comical contrast. Ellie assumed it was a personal quirk, unaware it was a thoughtful arrangement by the Duke, specifically for her. A small vial caught Ellie's eye. The vendor, seeing her youth, initially dismissed her. But, catching the gaze of the entourage behind her, he quickly changed his tune, showering her with attention. The vial contained a healing potion. Though expensive, its effects were minimal. Ellie briefly considered buying it for the Duke, but recalling his reaction to the pills, she decided he likely wouldn't appreciate it. A maid mentioned a local custom. Children on their first outing to the market should buy a gift for their family. Ellie hesitated. Would he even like it? She wondered. Passing a jewelry stall, she spotted a pair of earrings that mirrored Damien's eye color. She had to have them. A family of 3 jostled their way to the stall, seemingly browsing. Ellie, however, saw the child subtly slip something into his pocket. She normally wouldn't interfere, but knowing she'd be conducting business here in the future, she couldn't tolerate such dishonesty. This will make a perfect gift for the Duke, she thought. Ellie confronted the child, catching him red-handed. The adults initially tried to explain it away as childish ignorance, offering apologies. But, noticing the stern looks from the guards, the man quickly distanced himself from the child, claiming he could be taken as a slave for all he cared. The child panicked. But you told me to do it. You promised to return my thing and buy me bread. The man shoved the child to the ground. Ellie couldn't stand for it. These people were clearly exploiting the child. Exposed, the man, enraged, lashed out at Ellie. The guards rushed to Ellie's side, glaring at the man. He was in serious trouble now. He'd assaulted the Duke's daughter in broad daylight. If looks could kill, he'd be dead 1,000 times over. Escape was impossible. As the child prepared to slip away, Ellie offered him a green bracelet. Wait, she said. This is yours. It was a family heirloom, stolen by the adults and used to coerce him into thievery. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the child vowed to repay Ellie's kindness. Learning he lived in an orphanage with his siblings, Ellie bought him a large bag of food. If you ever need my help, she said, I'll be there. My name is Ellie. He replied, I'm Grace. Ellie froze. Could this be the Grace, the devoted holy knight who would later sacrifice his life protecting the heroine in the original story? But Grace was supposed to be a girl. He's certainly handsome, though, she thought. Grace, noticing her compliment, blushed. Beside them, Damien scowled. Why are you blushing? He muttered. Meanwhile, the guards apprehended the fleeing thief. A maid, worried about Ellie's safety, purchased some medicine. It was time to return. A guard scooped up both children in his arms. As they left, Ellie gave the medicine to Grace, bidding the future holy knight farewell. Please take care of Damien in the future, she whispered. Back in the Duke's office, Baron Amanta and Wayberg had successfully crafted fulcrums using the new mineral. The Duke was pleased. Just then, Ellie and Damien returned. Ellie recounted their adventures in the marketplace and presented her gift, a pair of earrings. The Duke, upon seeing them, touched his ear, contemplating where he might get his ears pierced. Damien, these are especially for you, Ellie said. They match your eyes perfectly. The Duke froze, his heart sinking. Damien, slightly shy, produced an emerald necklace. I bought you a gift too, Ellie. Ellie, delighted, exclaimed how they thought alike, completely oblivious to the Duke, who stood silently fuming, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. Amanta, fearing an outburst, quickly intercepted the departing children. He stammered. Don't you two have a gift for the Duke? Of course, Ellie declared confidently, summoning a guard. We've just apprehended a band of notorious thieves, she reported to the Duke. Ellie explained, I didn't know what you'd like, Your Grace, so I prepared this surprise. Consider it my contribution to easing your burdens. Everyone present was speechless. Baron Amanta and Wayberg exchanged pitying glances with the Duke. I thought it was supposed to be a gift, the Duke thought, but this is just more work. Why is it so difficult to receive a simple present? Ellie dried Damien's hair. He was overjoyed to have spent the day with her. He was even more thrilled to receive his first gift from her. Yet, a slight disappointment lingered. He didn't like being